Let the warm, sweet oil flow! Murder Drones is back with a fantastically gory and mysterious new episode. And right off the bat, so many of my recent predictions ahead of this episode have already been shot down and now adore the spire of corpses around N's lair. However, this episode also confirmed some very dark speculations of mine and broke the deeper story open wide, and did it so with some wonderfully creepy reveals. And that's partly why I'm so late with this review and analysis, because each time I watched Heartbeat, I saw and learned something new. But without any further preamble or ado, let's launch ourselves into this. Hi there everyone, Lars here from Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. So snuggle up on this especially inhospitable nuclear night, pour yourselves a warm cup of sweet oil, and let's break this down. I'll give a brief overview of the episode's events, give my general observations, and then follow through with a little theorizing. Heartbeat opens with a dream/memory sequence wherein we see N, V, and J as worker drones. Yep, they are worker drones who serve in a creepy mansion that is clearly back on Earth. We can see so with the moon. And here they are, obedient servants waiting on a lady who designed them, who may or may not be this girl called Tessa. N and V have their meet cute, which is actually pretty cute, before N is introduced to a new robot with creepy eyes and a shy personality. N wakes up and, like Batty, has a glorious crash.
My heart! Oh, my heart!
Meanwhile, Uzi is going through some trauma as the weird little symbol in her eye that we saw from the previous episode causes a mirror to shatter. That's a dozen years of bad luck, girl. But it turns out that whatever hacking or transformation is going on with her has granted Uzi with powers of some kind. And a poorly restrained V teases her, saying that they should just perform an autopsy on Uzi and see what's up. In this disassembly drone's addled programming, V sees this as confirmation as to why all worker drones should be eliminated when they exhibit issues and powers like these. Uzi then confers with N, telling him that she's learned that the communications equipment is a bust, and it's unclear if J.C. Jensen in space even knows what's going on the planet. This confuses everyone because Jay was receiving instructions from someone. It's clear that even the disassembly drones don't even know the full story and have even forgotten their past. Meanwhile, Uzi's father Khan is in a parent-teacher conference, learning afresh just how much he's neglected his daughter. This teacher also has no soul and is freaking playing solitaire during this meeting. Oh, if only it was so easy to get away with that when you do school meetings, and I speak from experience. But it's sad that these other kids also get to sit in and hear all of these embarrassing things from Khan and the teacher, but I guess it's better than being outside with a ton of murders that are happening. But before I get into that, let me address this odd occurrence with the worker drone, Doll, a Russian-speaking girl whose family was all killed. She recognizes an obvious disassembly drone trap and uses powers similar to Uzi's to prevent a fellow student from falling victim to Jay's reanimated corpse. So that gets me to all the warm, sweet murders, as the worker drones try to clean up the death and devastation left behind from last episode. A strange eldritch abomination is isolating and brutally murdering worker drones before assimilating their corpses into a terrifying new form. We see Absolute Solver make a return and a message about not having enough materials. Come on, Jay, I know a girl needs her accessories, but isn't this a bit much? In light of all the murders and disappearances, Thad reaches out to Uzi and N, inviting them back to the colony and being an absolute Chad on top of that by returning Uzi's gun. And when I say Chad, I mean this Chad, not this Chad.
Classic toxic masculinity, Chad. That's never gonna end up problematic.
So N and Uzi return with Thad to stop the murders. N brings an end to worldwide prejudice with a self-made Hallmark card. If art like that could stop all wars, we would live in such a better world. And it certainly earns N entrance back into the colony, so I guess it's really not all bad.
Genocide robot? Oh, all right. Just don't do it again. Get in here, you goobs.
When the trio make their way to the site of the most recent disappearances, all unholy hell breaks loose. The zombie amalgamation of Jay and worker drones uses a horrifying sequence of illusions, including human bodies and a fake Thad and a tearing Khan in half to terrorize Uzi. Jay manages to destroy Uzi's railgun and taunts her further by saying that she doesn't remember her real masters. Uzi and all her fellow drones are just puppets and toys for this weird puppet master's pleasure. En manages to free Uzi just in time before the railgun goes off and destroys what's left of Jay. En finishes the job by sticking the weird cyborg zombie heart that comes out of this amalgamation as it tries to scuttle away, and he thoroughly disassembles it. However, Uzi freaks out and pushes En away. She's now truly terrified of the disassembly drone threat. So En retreats, confused and dejected about what's happened, as Khan leads the other worker drones to the site of the commotion. He and Uzi reunite, and En goes back to V, who is pretending to remain restrained. And Doll at the very end uses her powers to destroy a suspicious bug drone while looking longingly at a picture of En. Whew, so that's a lot happening, and just in 17 minutes. Even though this episode was shorter than the pilot, it felt like way more happened. But it was a good continuation of what we saw in the pilot. I thought it was interesting that Uzi has already returned to the colony so soon, but I think that this helps set up potential redemption for Khan, as well as obviously putting tension between her and En. And this might put Uzi right into the next set of dangers as she's in the colony with Doll and who knows what else. And while everyone is focused on the events within the colony, they will then be blind to the horrors that we see flying from Earth. So the storytelling in this episode was concise, the dark humor was on point, and we got a surprising amount of character development. Again, only in 17 minutes. Seriously, massive shows with more money and talent have done far less in an hour's worth of runtime than what Liam Vickers and Glitch have so far pulled off. I'd love to see what their pre-production planning and writing sessions have been like, to see what techniques they've utilized to make such a strong story, because it's working so fantastically well. But with that being said, let's talk observations. Some are sweet, some are funny, some are curious, and others are a wee bit disturbing. So, disassembly drones are converted worker drones. This again fits the obvious vampire aesthetic that the show is going for. En and company have obviously had their brains messed around with, but parts of their original personalities still shines through. En appears to have been way more shy before becoming loud and outgoing, but the awkwardness still remains. Jay was always a pushy jerk, but V is an interesting specimen. We only really know her as a murderous psychopath devoid of all feelings and eager to do horrifyingly messed up stuff to other robots. But this clashes with the blushing, soft-spoken girl that we saw at the very beginning of this episode, the drone that she used to be. And this leads me actually to a quick theory, if you don't mind. And that is, V is a deadly tsundere. Yes, we've already seen that. I mean, that's kind of been there in the advertising, but really, what's the evidence for this? Where might this be going? First of all, we must acknowledge that Liam Vickers understands his anime tropes. He knows the first girl trope, and we've already seen this in full swing this episode. So for those who don't know, First Girl stipulates that the first girl that the main male character has any sort of meaningful interaction with will be the girl that the boy always goes after without exception. V and En shared a literal spark between them, and En has been simping for V ever since. But it seemed like V barely knew who En was, abandoning him at any opportunity, and yet when En breaks into the colony back in the pilot episode, V acknowledges him and flashes him a wink. I just took that as a joke playing on En's obvious crush, and yet in episode 2 we see jealous glances from V throughout Heartbreak's opening and ending. She even pretends to remain imprisoned while En mopes and says a very tsundere line at the end of the episode. Why would V be doing all this when she could easily just break free and murder Uzi and then continue on slaughtering the colony? There's really nothing at this point that's stopping her. Well, my theory is that just like how N's programming and memory have been completely muddled and changed, which had changed him as an individual, the same thing has obviously occurred to V. She's now a murderous, hollow, tsundere psychopath. But just as N feels this draw to V that goes beyond his known memory, the same probably goes for her. Whether it be because N licked her and kickstarted an unknown healing process back in episode 1, or far more likely that her feelings were repressed and skewed thanks to the reprogramming, it's still there. As a disassembly drone, she pushed and mistreated N to encourage him to become more like her, so that way her feelings would in turn reach him. And if that doesn't make any sense to you, then you obviously haven't watched enough anime. But Liam has been devouring anime like breakfast cereal, and the signs are all there. So will these two drones get together and be a perfect cute little ship? I don't know, but Internecion Cube might give us a bit of a hint if we're looking in the right direction.
Bonjour. To whom am I speaking? On this end is your lover and forever soulmate.
Yeah, good to talk to you too. So, you clearly know who it is, and those are labels we definitely haven't discussed.
Understood. Reconnecting with you brings me no joy. That was a lie, to cover my true feelings of adoration. How approachably vulnerable of me. Are you now confused at my intentions due to me being a Hot Mess Express, quirky baka gamer girl?
Ignoring that.
Anyway, back to the general observations. N is proven clumsy at every turn, and I freaking love it. The processing animation that we see on Uzi's face is hilarious. Her sweating before meeting Thad was amazing and on point for an angsty teenager. And Khan is far more complicated than I first believed. He's still a bad dad, but not entirely a bad guy. He's more steeled than we saw back in the pilot, running into danger and this time staring down N. There's a fighter in this guy, and we'll probably learn how losing his wife and such is what drove him behind the doors in the first place, because he felt like he couldn't win through direct action. The parent-teacher conference is also again just absolutely 100% accurate and on point, and I know this because I was a teacher. And when we look at Absolute Solver, this is super important, and I love that I called it over a year ago and that it's coming back into play. Haha! More on that in a bit. And we have our explanation now for why there is a spire of corpses. The worker drones are unbelievably gullible and stupid, getting themselves killed right and left by stupid, obvious projections. Uzi and Khan are really the exceptions when it comes to this colony. And we also get hilarious confirmation that Uzi is a certified ADHD kid. Again, I taught so many of these kids exactly like this, and they did all of these things just minus the hacking another kid's brain. Though a few of those kids did live rent-free in their classmates' heads. And another thing that I observed that I thought was really interesting is that the colony has really appropriated a lot of abandoned human materials. Not just in a junky way, but in a survival mode kind of way. They're using a highly fortified factory with access to a large amount of power. Those cryo chambers that we see in this episode require lots of electricity, and those drones are tapping right into that, which is pretty smart and humorously contrasts with their otherwise gullible nature. In D&D, we call this high intelligence, low wisdom. And the last major observation is this: Thad is a cool guy. Need we say more? Alright, so that's the general observations out of the way. All of these details, whether plot important or not, all come together to make the world of murder drones just really come alive. For only 2 episodes, we've been fed so much information in vibrant detail that it feels like we've gotten way more for our buck than what Amazon gave across 9 hours plus for the Rings of Power. Again, Murder Drones is such a fun watch because it's a brilliant story told without any needless fluff. Liam Vickers knows exactly what he wants to communicate, and he does just that. He utilizes the strengths of visual storytelling to flesh out the world in a way that would drag down a written work if it wanted to communicate as much detail. The environment is made part of the story instead of just a place in which stuff happens. Character conversations are lively, they stay on topic, and lead the plot along. And I'll say that making that work is a whole lot more difficult than it looks. Brevity, or the constraints of time, usually lends itself to much stronger storytelling because you aren't allowed to deviate from what's important. And what we see here in Heartbeat, every scene is essential for building up the characters, building up the tension, building up the mystery, or developing the overall plot. But let's get to what you really want, the next big theory. Well, it looks like I was right when I said that someone was screwing around with the drones. They've been hacked, and it gets even more deliciously complicated than what I realized back in episode 1. So let's break down what we're seeing here. It all begins with Absolute Solver. En and Uzi have no idea what this program is, but it's far more than just a regenerating protocol. Remember that when En was rebooted, Absolute Solver was still blocked, so it's not just regeneration, or it might not even be regeneration in the first place. We've seen Absolute Solver help the Lovecraftian J abomination absorb materials from other drones and surrounding machinery, but has also been used by Dahl and to a lesser extent Uzi to destroy stuff. Absolute Solver is more likely a program that unlocks the worker and disassembly drone's fullest potential to enact the Puppet Master's true intentions, which, as I speculated a year ago, is to wipe out humanity, and more on that in just a bit. But this brings me to the next big question. Who is responsible really for all this insanity and gore? Who is responsible for Absolute Solver in the first place? Is it J.C. Jensen in space? Is it Tessa? Or is it someone else? Here's what I personally believe. J.C. Jensen purchased the worker drones for their colonizing efforts. When the colony went bust and the drones were freed, the company caught wind of the machine's autonomy and probably even the secret embedded within their programming. They seized the remaining worker drones and warped them into disassembly drones. If you think about it, it actually makes a whole lot of sense. The disassembly drones are meant to kill worker drones. If they don't quench their need for oil, it will cause them to overheat and die. The sun kills them and their brains have been messed with until they were scrambled before getting shot out in one-way rockets to the planet. The J.C. Jensen Company is solving their mistake in the same way that they made it, just as Uzi keeps bringing up. But Heartbeat makes things nuttier by introducing us to Tessa, the young girl who possibly made the worker drones. Is she indeed the inventor? Or could she be the puppet master? Or is she someone else entirely? We don't know enough yet, but we are introduced still to the significant third party. Twice this episode. Tessa and the mysterious being that claims to be the drone's puppet. Now, Tessa and the Puppet Master could be the same thing, but let's assume for a moment that they aren't. While we can't be sure where Tessa is in this whole plot, we know that this Puppet Master is actively involved, and they want to use the worker drones and disassembly drones for their own purposes. It has seen and orchestrated the deaths of countless worker drones like Uzi's mother. It also knows humans and has replicated human flesh, like the hand that grabbed Thad, and the weird fleshy bits around the heart that En disassembles at the end of the episode. This means that we have potentially 3 different goals from 3 different parties other than the worker drones and disassembly drones. And these 3 goals that we can see right here are, number 1, the annihilation of all sentient robots, championed by J.C. Jensen in space. 2, giving the robots a chance to throw off humanity and live on their own, which is championed by the worker drones and might even be championed by their original inventor or someone like Tessa. And then 3, control and destroy everything, which is obviously the Puppet Master's ultimate goal. This all comes down to what Absolute Solver is. This power was given to the drones, but it is purposefully blocked by the administrator. It is the power to warp technology, to destroy, to create, to basically become mechanical gods. And I feel like we've seen this somewhere before. Does this mean that murder drones and Internecion Cube are indeed connected?
Possible. I alone will remain god of this world. Oh, I'm sweaty. Who programmed that?
You good, Uzi?
I'm good. Better than good. I am God.
The thing is that the drones are all pawns in much larger schemes, all revolving around the godlike power of Absolute Solver. Different factions are corrupting the drones' programming to their own ends, whether to wipe out the sentient droids, to replace humanity, or to create a separate worker drone world. The main plot of Murder Drones is not just robots planning revenge on humanity, but figuring out their true past and discovering the parties and plans that seek to control their fate. Uzi and N will have to ultimately find their own answers, beat the hacking, and make their own decisions and destiny. But will this ultimate power be their demise or their salvation? And yeah, given what we've seen so far of the story, that might sound a bit improbable at first, but there everything is. It fits what Liam Vickers is known for. He dazzles his audiences with crazy worlds and lovable characters, glazed with a heaping amount of dark humor, which all hides far deeper and twisted stories underneath. And if this is just what we've gotten so far in 2 episodes, I can only imagine what kinds of insanity is up ahead in episode 3. Will this be the episode where we get to see the party? I mean, we've pretty much burned our way through all of the other trailer footage, which means that we are pretty much in uncharted territory right now, and that's where the fun really begins. But that will do it for this video. While we're waiting for episode 3 to drop, if you're looking for more theories or writing advice, please check out our other videos here. You can also drop by our podcast, Camille's Harem, found on Podbean, iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, the works. We have writing exercises for all you novice authors on our Pinterest page, and of course, we invite you to join our growing community of novice authors. Links for all that and more are in the description below. And until the next video, y'all, thank you for joining us on this horrifying, hilarious fever dream adventure that we call writing, and choose.
Lucky for you, it's nap time. Time to go into my mouth now. Sneaky, sneaky, sneaking away. Get snuck upon. Ow. Ow. Ow, 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 ow.
Okay, that was the freakiest thing I've ever seen.